So welcome everybody for tonight's special virtual session. This evening's subject is going global, and we have a very, very special guest joining us tonight. We have Betsy Lowther. She is the Social Content Director for BBDO Worldwide. And those of you following along, we're going to be using hashtag SMStrategy16. So just go ahead and tweet along and follow along. So Betsy, she is an award-winning social media and content strategist. One thing that I wanted to share, I know she will definitely not brag about herself, but in 2011 she was named PR Week's 40 Under 40. And so really a great accomplishment. And she was one of the first real bloggers out there into the world, and she created an amazing following. She spent time in Asia. And she's worked with really big brands from Budweiser to Gucci and Hewlett-Packard and so on. And so we're really lucky to have Betsy and her expertise this evening to talk about going global and really getting the social media content out there on the broadest scale possible, the World Wide Web. So everyone, welcome Betsy.
Thank you. Hi.
Hello. So, Betsy, if you just want to introduce yourself real quick, and then the way that we work this is we do round robin questions, and so I'll just kind of interject and pop on and say, oh, it's Mark's turn to talk, and then we'll go around. Sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great. So I'll try to be brief in talking about myself. I think Holly did a great job of sort of a little overview there. I'm a former journalist, and while I was a journalist, I started a blog. I was actually living in Singapore at the time, a fashion blog, and I got the attention of a lot of fashion brands who reached out to me. And I always thought that they could do a lot better with their outreach. They were inviting me to these events and these experiences that were thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars in some cases. And I thought, if they really understood bloggers, they might really be able to capitalize on this and use this as the start of a relationship, not just this one-time spike in buzz. And, bloggers were kind of the first advent of social media. It was that first sort of authentic channel where people were talking and communicating about brands, but not necessarily through traditional, media and traditional PR. So all my experience in that led to a job at Ogilvy. My first week at Ogilvy, I got assigned to the BP oil spill, which was about 1 month in the making at that point. I spent about a year working on that, which was a great crash course in crisis communications. I was actually sort of a roving reporter on the ground, on the beaches, helicoptering out to the spill site, being with the animal cleanup teams, just trying to show a lot of the workers and a lot of the really committed people who were actually trying to make a difference. And people asked me a lot if it was hard to work for the bad guy, but there were so many good people working on that project and working on that recovery that it actually wasn't that hard. From there I went and I led social media for Gap. They were a new Ogilvy client, and then I switched over to a new agency up here in New York called Anomaly. Our biggest clients were Budweiser, Captain Morgan, some of the Marriott brands, Carhartt, Dick's Sporting Goods, and I oversaw social for all of them. And since then, I've been at a couple agencies. I worked on CoverGirl for a while at a small agency, helping run social for them, and now I'm at BBDO. I work with our clients here, turning traditional advertising campaigns, which is what we were known for here at BBDO, into social content. So how do you take a traditional 30-second TV spot and transform that into a social experience, into social content that resonates? Obviously, the different marketing channels are very different. They're becoming more and more blended, but what plays well on TV isn't necessarily what plays well on social. And a lot of good brands recognize that. And so it's really my job to say, okay, what can we take from this, and how do we translate that into social? And how do we make it as impactful as possible using social channels or social experiences or getting people to use social themselves to talk about the brand? So that's me in a nutshell. Cue the Austin Powers joke. How do I get out of this nutshell? I'm happy to take your questions about any of that. Obviously, with a lot of my clients here, I know our focus today is a little bit of the global scene. I lived abroad in Asia for 4 years, in Beijing and in Singapore, sort of at the beginning of the social media start. And that definitely gave me a lot of perspective on global communities and how different social media is around the world. And now I work with a lot of my clients who are often US based but have huge, global reputations on how do they manage all the different country sites, all the different social accounts that pop up, whether it's Budweiser Brazil or Hewlett Packard India, or even just a Gap store in LA. How do you manage all of that and keep that under the same brand vision while letting those entities kind of do their thing? And so it's definitely a tough challenge in building a strategy that works for everyone, but allows that flexibility. But I'm happy to talk about that as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that overview. I think some of those even brands that you shared really impress our audience, but also help get them come up with some good questions later on in the chat.
Cool.
So first up this evening, we have Mary. She's going to kick off the rounds of questions. So Mary, if you want to unmute and then just pop on there and take it away with Betsy.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Betsy.
Hi, Mary.
Just a quick question. With your blogging, and basically, obviously, that's where you started, what are some of your favorite tools and some of the best tools to actually engage an audience and get them to take your material and move it forward?
Well, I think, with blogging, I tend to be pretty simple. I don't go into tons and tons of different tools. In fact, I use the Blogger platform. A lot of people, of course, use the WordPress platform, which is probably a little more popular at this point. But I find that both of those build in a lot of what you need to know as far as analytics, as far as what's driving content to your site, as far as what keywords are driving content to your site, and obviously just the management of content, of comments, of spam, and all of that stuff. So I find that they're pretty robust, and they allow you to do quite a lot and have a lot of flexibility. And of course, now you can build your own templates. I bought a template off of Etsy.com, which there are people who are web designers who make these custom templates for platforms like Blogger and WordPress. And for $10 or $20, you can get something that looks really customized and stylized. And that's a great resource that I only recently found out about. But I would say the biggest thing right now that is key to blogging is having that extended social network. Most people, blogging has changed quite a lot, and some people would say that blogging is kind of passé at this point. A lot of people have moved to social networks exclusively to kind of share their thoughts, and you have people now who are Instagram influencers, and all they do is Instagram, but they've got tens of thousands of followers, and it's like a blog might have been back in the day, but instead, they're just doing it through that platform. Same thing with Twitter, a little less with Facebook, but Snapchat is another one where people are really like Snapchat icons in their own right. I find that having a traditional blog, what I need to do is sort of get that message out through as many mediums as possible. So if I post a blog post, ideally I'd want to post it on my Facebook page, on my Twitter account, do something on Instagram and kind of direct people, remind them that I've got a post there, and use as much of those channels as possible to kind of get the word out, because I find that people aren't going back to blogs over and over again like they used to back in the day. They kind of need reminders to drive them there, and using an extended social network is a great way to do that. And if you don't have the followers on the social network, paid social is really crucial and not that expensive, especially for people like you and I, to reaching some people that you would want to reach. So if you had a blog that was about, well, fashion, as mine is, I could actually target people who follow certain fashion brands and just get my posts about my new blog post in front of them on Facebook. And then I can be really smart about getting those fashion people who would actually be interested over to that site and making sure that I've got that exposure. And hopefully they would share that as well and give me a little bit of organic boost in the meantime. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Oh, good.
Excellent. So our next question is from Mark, and I was thinking after Mary, we'll just go through. If you guys want to just share with Betsy real quick what your day job is so that she can understand what kind of businesses we're connecting with. So Mark, you're next to ask Betsy your question.
Sure, thank you. Hello, Betsy. Before I ask the question, I thought I'd share a best practice. I discovered the reason I was having trouble connecting to the Google Hangout was because I inadvertently had Skype running in the background from a prior meeting. So Skype had control of my camera and my microphone, and that was what the problem was.
I thought you were just very still, because it just shows like a still image of you. And I was like, wow, it took me a minute to realize it wasn't actually you live.
It's when I say cheese for a long period of time. It gets
exactly. Like,
So after that, Betsy, can you share with us, as you're blogging and you're coming up with your ideas, how do you vet the content with your employer before actually releasing it on behalf of your clients?
Well, so my blogging is done on a purely personal level. Although I do have some experience working for my clients on a blog, on blog posts. Most recently, I was doing some technology type posts for Hewlett Packard. We were doing some cool stuff, like it was fairly recently, the Back to the Future 2 day. I think it was October 15th, where it was like the day that Back to the Future 2 said that they were going to in the future, and everyone had hoverboards and like clothes that fit them, you know, seamlessly and kind of like scrunched together electronically. Anyway, if you missed it, it was a big holiday for Back to the Future fans. Normally, when I am blogging or writing any content for a client, there's a pretty robust approval process that goes into it. So, you know, at every stage, whether it's what's the idea going to be, what's the post, you know, who are we going to interview for the post, what does that post look like, you know, who's seeing it. There are different levels of people who are kind of seeing it and making sure that it's on voice, on brand, telling the right story that people want to tell. And so I've never really had an experience, and perhaps it's because some of the brands I work with are so big, where about 12 people haven't seen at some point a blog post that I was putting together. When I blog for myself, obviously I'm the only one that has to see it. So I don't talk about anything controversial that I'm worried about my employer seeing and being upset about. But that does make it a little bit easier. And so, you know, I think there's always, no matter what the content is, a need for a kind of standard approval process. How do you know that everyone has signed off on it and the right people have signed off on it? Because you certainly wouldn't ever want to put something out there that would get the client in trouble. And as we know, social media can be a bit tricky these days, where the one wrong statement or the one wrong, you know, kind of misinterpreted post, and suddenly it blows up in their face. So I find that the more clients that sign off on it and agree to it, the more you're kind of covering your back. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Sure.
Great question. Yeah, thanks, Betsy. A lot of people do need to approve, especially when you're going through big brands like that. Here at UD, on our end of things, we don't have a big approval process, really. We just kind of put together the content that we think that our audience wants, and we go with it. But there are people who have their thoughts on, well, we're too fun, or we're too this, or we're too that. But the data really comes through and shows, you know, the engagement tells the story. And I'm sure you could speak a lot to your analytics as well. In terms of what's working, and but also being on the safe side too. You certainly don't want to upset Gap. So
of course.
So our next question comes from Michelle. So Michelle, I'll have you take it away.
Hi.
Hi, Betsy. So right now I'm a freelance social media manager, I guess you would say, and I'm working for a few small businesses. So my question kind of ties into this. What advice would you give to someone pursuing a career in social media?
Good question. I don't know what it's like down in Delaware right now or Delaware and surrounding areas, but here in New York, social media managers are in high demand. It's a great time to kind of get into that career. It sounds like you're getting, experience on your own, which is good for resumes. So obviously, having clients of your own, even small businesses, give you that experience and give you kind of a leg up on other people who might be looking for the job. I think one of the best or biggest pieces of advice I could give is look for a position that has someone that's more senior than you kind of working in the same discipline. Because I find that, especially at smaller companies, and I imagine, companies that are outside of New York or some of the big metro areas are smaller companies, they tend to give social media to someone fairly junior and they give it all to them and they're like, here you go. And social media is growing at a crazy rate. And now, I mean, there's so many platforms, depending on your client or who you're working for, you could be in as many as like 6 or 7 different platforms. Or I always recommend starting with the basics and kind of building from there. But if you've got someone that you can learn from, so you don't have to constantly be kind of trying to keep up and figuring all that out, then I think that that's a really great way to get started. Someone with more experience can kind of guide you. It's not always possible, but I also think it's a good sign if they have more than one social media person in their social media department. Because again, even with clients I have, they'll put all of social media on one person, and these days that's just too much for one person to handle.
Yeah, definitely. That's me right now.
I can imagine. Well, when you're
Thank
freelance, it's you get a chance to do it all, and in some ways it's great because you should know how to do analytics. You should understand, what's going on with the different platforms and all the best practices for them. You should have, the opportunity to experiment a little bit. Lately, I've been experimenting a lot with Snapchat with some of my clients, and they've been making a lot of changes to make it even more brand friendly than ever before. But and so small clients are great for that, and you learn a lot of the ropes. But when you only work by yourself on the same things, if you're the only one and you're the go-to expert, then you never really learn that much. So if you are in that position, there are a ton of conferences and other events that I think that you should try to push to take advantage of, because you've got to get out there and see what other people are doing as well and kind of hear the latest and the greatest. Social media is changing all the time, so it's really important to stay up to date.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so networking is so important. I mean, I'm sure, Betsy, when you were just starting and all of these platforms were evolving and you were on them all right away, you really just kind of look out in the world and try to find your fellow social media people, which is why I followed your career so closely, because we were both journalists and former Blue Hens, always Blue Hens, hashtag Blue Hens forever. Woohoo! But, really just finding your people out there in this space, it does help because you share tips, you share crisis stories, you share mistakes, you share wins, and that's how this works. This is an emerging cutting edge field still, and you just need to find your people and put yourself out there. So those conferences do, there is a big ROI with that, and just finding, another person to talk to about social. So great advice.
Yeah, and even if you can't make it to a conference, a lot of times they're streamed online. There are great TED Talks or other kinds of ways that you can see people talking about the latest and the greatest on things happening online. So you don't always have to travel there. You can still get a sense of what's happening. I do say that, when you're in social, the biggest thing that you can do to really understand social and to really get ahead is to walk the walk. So I'm on all the platforms. Some of them I'm still learning how to do. I have to admit, my assistant teaches me a lot of Snapchat stuff, and I'm endlessly fascinated by it. It's a little bit younger than my typical or my demographic, I would say. But you know, I've always been really active on Facebook as a person, but also as a brand, as my blog, on Twitter, on Instagram, you know, as these big, on YouTube, I don't actually have a YouTube channel, but I spend a lot of time on it. Being actually involved is how you see how these sites are developing, and things are constantly changing. You know, Twitter 5 years ago was a much smaller kind of cool kid community-based entity, I would say. I really enjoyed it then. Twitter has been my favorite platform for a long time. But now it's gotten really big, and it's much more of a news-driven channel, a live channel for a lot of things that are happening in the moment. And so, you know, without actually being on there and seeing what people are talking about and seeing what people are responding to what you're saying, it can be really hard to kind of grasp those nuances and to continue to treat tweets as you might have always done when really there's a lot of changes happening.
Yeah. Excellent. All right, so our next question is from Kadeirdre. I know that you'll hear her audio, but she's just got this still, so we're not going to see all of her
She's
fun.
one of those frozen people. I'm like,
yeah,
wow, they're really not moving.
She's really good at holding her position.
Exactly.
So, go ahead. Oh, is she there? Kadeirdre.
Totally
I'm going to go ahead. She is frozen. So what I'm going to do is I have her list of some of their questions, so I'll ask her first question for you. What strategy do you have in place to find the type of content that your target audiences like the most?
Well, you know, there's two parts of that. One is sort of me personally and what I do with my blog, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about what I do with my clients and how I kind of guide them in what they should be saying on social media. I have a Venn diagram I like to draw, and it's on one side it's what the brand wants to talk about, and on the other side it's what people actually want to hear. And there's this little tiny overlap where it's actually like what the brand wants to talk about and what people want to hear, and that's the sweet spot. A lot of times brands are just really interested in talking about themselves. Like, oh, we want to talk about we've got this new promotion happening, or we have a new article about, you know, X, Y, and Z, or a blog post or whatever. But they're not things that the audience cares about. And so, you know, you get 3 click-throughs and you've put all this time and effort into it, and it's kind of being a little bit tone deaf to the audience. So, you know, again, you have to kind of get away from the messaging that's all about me, 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 and think about, okay, what do people actually care about? What are some of the, you know, the trends that are happening in culture that are relevant to our company? Can we capitalize on those? And then once you start putting content out, it's a lot about paying attention to what's resonating with people. This is where analytics come in and are super important. You know, we get reports every week for the work I do on Hewlett-Packard that just shows different engagement rates, click-through rates, things like that, so we can really see what's kind of rising to the top. And, you know, sometimes it's really surprising. And sometimes, you know, there are always going to be things, especially when you're working with brands, that they desperately want to get out there and they desperately want to talk about. And no matter how much you counsel them that maybe that's just not very exciting for people, you know, they're going to insist on it, and there's really nothing you can do about that. But when you've got the proof that shows actually people really gravitated towards X, Y, and Z this last month, then that really goes a long way towards showing, okay, this is what people want to hear. Let's develop more things in that range, and hopefully that continues to grow and get people more and more tapped in.
Okay. That's great. Great response. I appreciate that. I know that we all just kind of pulled a couple of little nuggets there. I love the idea of, you know, where those circles kind of connect. And we talked a little bit about that last week in our optimization class, where we talked about, you know, the buzz of the day, and then your people, and then interests. And when any time those things can intersect, that's the sweet spot of where, you know, someone's going to want to stop for a second and take a look at what you have to say. So our next question is from Karen, and then after we finish with Karen's question, I'm going to go ahead and I have a great question from one of our students on Twitter, so we'll do that one next. Go ahead, Karen. Karen, you have to unmute yourself. There you go. Nope. No. So, Karen, we can't hear what you're saying, but I have your question here, which is good. So I'm going to go ahead and ask it for you. So her question is, which approach do you find the most effective in cutting through the clutter? Infographics, video, animations, a really great still image. What's the thumb stopper that you're looking for?
Yes. All of the above. In fact, I think it's really important to mix it up and try new things as much as possible. You know, a few years ago, it was all about the image, right? A lot of the platforms weren't developed enough to handle GIFs or to handle video. And now, you know, over the last couple of years alone, you've seen Facebook and Twitter integrate native video, and it's really taken off and has become a really great place to share video, where before everything was, you know, basically handled on YouTube and linked out. Now you can actually have those videos there. But I find you've got to really change it up and see what, you know, what is a little bit different. You don't want to show the same thing every time. Certainly standout imagery is super important, and it's kind of the default these days. More and more often, you know, I'm surprised when I don't see people really using imagery, especially on platforms like Twitter. Tweets with images are, I don't know, it's like 70 times more retweeted than tweets without images. Some really great statistics there that I totally just made that one up, but I swear it's something really powerful. And, you know, so people who are tweeting long rows, and I'm a little guilty of this myself, though I try to throw in some images. You know, those just don't get the real estate in the news feed like something with a really powerful image does. So obviously, the image alone makes the tweet twice as big on someone's screen, and that's a much better chance that they're going to be looking at it. I've just been working on a project that is about animations, and they're really short little videos that kind of bring to life these little cartoons. And it's been blowing up like gangbusters. So we've been doing really short videos, 10 seconds and under, whether it's Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. All the platforms have really responded well. And they look different and they look quirky. They're kind of illustrations that kind of draw themselves and are brought to life and then do something cool and then get erased. And that's really it. But again, something really different that we've never done before as a brand, something really different for the technology space. And I think trying to do those new things where people aren't expecting it is probably the best way to go about it. The video, as I said, video is doing really, really well on Facebook and Twitter. And we just did a big, BBDO just did a big study with Facebook where we looked at what makes video really successful. You know, obviously, again, we do a lot of big TV ads here at BBDO, and a lot of it does go on social and become social content. People share a puppy monkey baby, for example. I've met the puppy monkey baby. It is frightening and adorable. But when you have something like that, there's actually ways to really optimize it for Facebook. For example, things don't play automatically with sound on Facebook. So we've found through, you know, a lot of research and analytics that having subtitles is really key to kind of getting that message across, that people don't usually click the extra click to get the sound to come unless they're really compelled to. So there are a lot of things like that, you know, a lot of things to play with. I always think, you know, if you put a post up and as a brand and you covered your brand name, would people be able to tell that this post was from you? Does it really fit with your visual identity? Does it really fit with what you're trying to say? And I think that, you know, that's one of the biggest barometers that you can use, you know, when kind of curating together all this content and putting different stuff out there.
I love that. I just love that idea of taking away the, the brand and seeing what that identity is. We talked about tone and voice last week, and that's just spot on. So great, great, great advice. So let me see. Just make sure. I keep seeing, okay. So I have a question here from Twitter, again, hashtag SMStrategy16. So this is from Peter, and he says, how is social media marketing viewed abroad? Is the U.S. the sole innovator, or are foreign marketers making more progress?
I think social media, has grown almost worldwide at this point. I wish I had Facebook's numbers off the top of my head, but, I think there's 1.5 or so billion people on Facebook. A lot of them are in the U.S., but it's definitely spread well beyond that, and that's a good percentage of the world population if you think about it. I think the most important thing to think about when you're looking at social media around the world is what happens in the U.S. and how social is done in the U.S. is not necessarily the same as how it's happening in Germany or the UK or India or especially China. China and Russia, for example, have their own social media networks that are really big and much more prevalent than even Facebook. And of course, China can't get most of the main social networks because of the Great Firewall of China. So they have developed their own, like Sina Weibo, my poor Chinese coming out, and Chi that exist purely there. And with most of the clients I work with have a China-based social team that really just handles that China social market. One of the things, Facebook is the #1 social platform in something like 127 out of 138 countries. But one of the things I was reading recently is that it's really interesting to look at, okay, Facebook wins almost all around. What's the #2 network in all the different countries? And like in the US, it's Instagram. But in Canada, they count Reddit as a social platform, and Reddit is the #2. And as you look at the second most popular platform, you really see a lot of differences across the world at what's really rising to the top. I'm doing some work right now with Germany, and Germany has long been really hesitant to embrace Twitter. Twitter's been really popular across a lot of Europe, but in Germany, it's just not been as big. So there's a lot of nuances like that that you really have to take into account when you're looking at a global picture. And the best thing to do is have people ideally on the ground in all these places that can really help guide you. But even if you're looking at something and helming it from a centralized US location, you've got to pay attention to at least some of these key differences, because what works in the US is not necessarily what's going to work in Singapore or India or somewhere else.
Excellent. Great questions and great sidebar conversation happening on Twitter tonight. So thanks to everybody who's continuing to live tweet this event. And Betsy, I'm going to apologize in advance because we're blowing up your Twitter account for sure. Your social mentions and cloud are going to go through the roof. So our next question is from Mary, but what I'm going to do is, Mary, since we sort of touched on this subject, if you want to, I'll pause and come back to you if you want to think of a different question, only because we've talked a little bit about the balance of photo and information in a social post. So I'm going to move to Mark, if that's okay, Mary, because his next question kind of talks a little bit about crisis and managing that with people. So we'll go to Mark next.
Good, thank you. Betsy, I'd like to talk about what crisis management plans you might have in place if one of your clients, has a problem, or even if you personally are attacked by trolls because of some of your blogging. I know you said you do blogging on a personal level, but these can be fine lines. So you've got a client and you've got yourself and a crisis, and what plan is in place?
Yeah, it depends on the client because they're all a little bit different. I work with brands like, say, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, which is seeing more things like trolls who are like, I can't believe you laid off so many people in the 90s. People are still really upset by that. Or they see people who are like, I hate my laptop, it fell apart, you suck. A lot of that is not necessarily reasonable, rational people that can be sort of answered and dealt with in a customer service type way. And so a lot of that does actually get ignored. And sometimes if it's profane or really inappropriate for the forum, it gets removed. And most companies I know keep a policy, whether it's on their Facebook page or linked elsewhere, that allows them that that right to remove off-topic comments, not necessarily negative comments. I think most brands are smart enough to know that removing all negative comments is not the way to go about it. In fact, it tends to fuel the trolls even more. But certainly things that are inappropriate or attack other people or all of that stuff that can definitely be seen as really off topic. I think though the number one sort of program that we follow for most of my clients is when they're dealing with something, and a lot of times it's customer service type related stuff, whether it's something with the Gap or someone upset about a corporate policy or someone found something in their beer, is acknowledge publicly and then move to a private forum. So no one wants to be seen as ignoring their social media followers, and certainly social media has become sort of the 1-800 call center. People used to call in before to complain. Now they just post it on Facebook or they tweet it on Twitter. I'm guilty of this myself. If I'm really upset with a company and they've done something pretty egregious to me, then I will tweet that I'm unhappy with them. And I'm actually, sometimes it's just a little bit of an experiment. But more and more I'm impressed to see that I do get responses from brands who say, we're sorry that you had a bad experience. We'd like to talk to you about more. Can you please DM us your contact info? We'll have someone get in touch. And again, it's that acknowledging publicly, so showing not just the person, but showing all of your fans and followers that you are not ignoring, legitimate complaints or legitimate issues that are happening, but then moving it to a private forum so that you're not having this long back and forth with, well, then I found a bug in my beer, but blah, 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 blah. Okay, and also, a lot of times people tend to get, we replace their beer or we replace their shampoo or things like that. We definitely don't want people to take advantage of that just because they can, and people will. So by kind of moving into a private forum, that does really help. And so that's my number one piece of advice for just kind of dealing with basic issues that could have the potential to blow up. Be really quick with your response. Be back to someone within 24 hours if they're leaving comments on your wall or tweeting at you, and then acknowledge them and move it offline.
Cool. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Betsy. Okay, so our next question goes to Michelle, but again, this one is a little bit about, I think her audio, she's coming back in and out, or I just see her picture. Michelle, can we hear you? Nope. She asked about the top strategic recommendation for small businesses, but we sort of touched on that. And so I kind of wanted to move on to the next question and seeing, let's see if we can get some audio from Khadija. Can we hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Hello, Betsy.
Hi. Yay, you're back.
Sorry for the still picture. I'm still trying to get this.
No worries.
And my question was in reference to the changes, the frequent changes in social media. As social media changes frequently, how do you evaluate new social media platforms or tools for effectiveness, as well as whether or not they will be useful for the company, business, or brand that you're representing?
Yeah, so we do see a lot of social media entities pop up. Obviously I've mentioned Snapchat a few times. Um, and there are others that are kind of constantly appearing on the horizon, maybe get a little buzz, and you never know if they're going to take off or not. I think the best thing to do is sort of sit and wait. There are definitely some brands that are kind of sitting and waiting, but waiting to be kind of among the first. And I look at brands like Burberry, or they're a good example of a brand that really is sort of at the forefront of trying new things and trying new tools within platforms. But there usually isn't much benefit, especially unless you're a huge company, in being first to try something new. And I find that it's just as possible to kind of wait it out and see, is this worth putting resources into? Is this going to actually reach the people that I want to reach? Is this going anywhere? Because a lot of times it's not. And the same thing goes for new capabilities on platforms. So, Facebook Live just launched, a week or two ago. Okay, Facebook Live could be really, really cool, but just because it exists doesn't mean that you have to do it. And I actually think they do themselves a disservice by opening it up to everyone. Now every brand is like, we should do a Facebook Live thing. And, it's kind of killing it and oversaturating it before it really gets off the ground, because it actually is a pretty cool proposition. But, everyone's like, I got to be first. I want to do it first. And I don't really think that that's necessarily something that you have to do. In fact, sometimes it can be really great to see what other brands are doing and kind of get inspired, but kind of see also how they succeeded and how they didn't succeed. Sometimes they're really just doing it for the headline, for the PR headline. Burberry was the first brand to do X, Y, and Z on Snapchat. And, they're just kind of getting PR mileage out of it, as opposed to people actually engaging with it and it actually making a difference, in their community and with their product. Remind me of your second part of your question.
The second part was whether or not using these tools, utilizing these social media, these new social media platforms, how do you determine whether or not they'll be useful for the company, business, or brand? But you did answer that in your answer, in a sense. You definitely. I thought you answered it.
I tend to recommend to people, start with the basics. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram for a lot of companies now, although not always, not necessarily. I think it really depends on the company. And I think, again, there's a lot of, everyone gets so excited about social. Oh, we should be on Instagram. Oh, we should be on Snapchat. Oh, we should be doing stuff on, I'm trying to think of what else is kind of new and big, Yik Yak or what have you. And it isn't necessarily necessary. In fact, sometimes less is more. We really advocate going for quality, not quantity. And that comes down to the number of posts that you're posting. Facebook, you don't need to post necessarily every day, especially if you're not putting paid support behind it. Instead, put your resources towards doing 3 great posts a week, put some paid resources behind it, and that can be much more effective than trying to put out a new piece of content every single day or several pieces of content per day, which a lot of brands still do. So again, I think that there's a lot of merit in the edit and in just focusing your resources to make the few pieces of content, or the few platforms that you're on as great as possible, and then looking beyond that to see, okay, where does it make sense for my company to go elsewhere? Am I really looking to get, people under the age of 25? Well, then maybe Snapchat is something where I might want to do some kind of fun activation with influencers on that platform. Or do I have a really great visual, element to my company? Well, then maybe Instagram is the way to go. But if you're a toilet company, then Instagram is probably not the way to go. And so it works for 10 other companies, probably or may not be the what works for your company, and maybe just sticking to some other platforms is more appropriate.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Betsy. I love the journalist in you coming out when you're talking about, there is some merit in the edit, and yeah, less is more. So well said. So I don't want to take up too much more of your time, so I just wanted to take maybe like one or two more questions. I think Mark had another really good one. There was a question from Karen about, do you or do you not continue with Fashion Spinach? It was very successful. Are you still doing that? Where does that stand? Where does your blog stand currently?
Well, it's funny. As soon as I got an agency job working in social media, I got way too busy to keep up with my own stuff. If you're a follower of the site, you've noticed in the last couple weeks I've actually started posting again. I have a post that's going up in about a half an hour today. So, I'm definitely sporadic about it, but I refuse to let it die. I really love doing it. I get excited about it, and we've definitely had long periods of hiatuses where I've just been way too busy to balance it and the rest of my work and life. But I keep saying it's going to have a comeback, and that time maybe now. Things are a little quieter for me going into the summer, so I'm like, okay, I better take advantage of it and give it a shot and see what we can do with it. So never say never.
Excellent. We'll keep following and cheering you on. So thanks for that transparency. It's true. Sometimes you just can't keep up with all the things. I noticed the other day that I haven't posted an Instagram post since New Year's. Nothing since New Year's. Nothing on Instagram.
Social media and blogging in particular is a huge time-consuming thing to do. And I'll never forget when I was working on Captain Morgan, we had a goal at the time of putting up one Facebook post a day. And our account lead, who was not well versed in social media at all, was like, I don't understand why it's so hard to get up one post a day. I've already posted 3 posts on Facebook today. Well, when you're dealing with something that is branded, that often goes through a ton of approvals, that has to be well thought out, well crafted, like a blog post or even a social post today. You don't want to put out stuff even on your own accounts that is kind of crappy. All that stuff takes time, and I think a lot of people don't realize the amount of time it takes to do social media and blogging really well, and that's why we do get these jobs that are like, here, all of social media is yours, and also writing brochures on the side because we feel like you probably have tons of time, when actually, some of the best companies in the world have huge social media staffs. Hewlett-Packard Enterprise that I'm working with right now have at least, I want to say 8 or 10 people internally, plus an agency that is not our agency of another 10 to 12 people who probably work on that account full time, plus other agencies like ours that deal with, special sections of whatever the social content is. So we're talking maybe 30 people who are working on this, if not full time, then quite a lot, and that's just one company. So they're lucky enough that they have the resources and the vision to be able to do that, but what they're doing is probably not that much different than what a small company is doing. I mean, obviously they're doing it in a much bigger, more heavily, what's the word I'm looking for? Populated way. But, they're all still just putting out Facebook posts and LinkedIn posts and things like that. And so imagine, one person carrying the burden that 30 people carry at another company, and it seems so unfair sometimes.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sure some of us on the smaller business side of things can completely relate. So I'm going to we'll do 2 more questions if that's okay with you,
Sure.
And then we'll wrap this up. I wanted to give Mary another chance because I know, Mary, your second question was already discussed. Did you have something else you wanted to ask? If not, we're going to go to Mark because I like his B2B question.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Mary. So, Mark, if you wanted to go ahead and ask your B2B question, I think it's pretty relevant.
Great. Betsy, I want to take you back to the toilet on Instagram. I'm a B2B marketer in the chemical industry, and I'm interested in your thoughts. How can technically oriented companies that are uh, selling a technical product to niche markets, engineers, for example, who need to approve these products, how can companies like that employ social media to their benefit?
This is really relevant for me because as I mentioned, one of the clients I've worked on a lot lately is Hewlett Packard Enterprise, which is their B2B side of the business. It's actually its own company now. They split from the consumer side officially a couple months ago. And, you know, the audience for this is not your mom and your dad. They don't sell laptops and printers. That's gone all the way with the consumer side. What they sell are business solutions like big data and analytics or cloud computing or a hybrid infrastructure. So we're looking at an audience of IT decision makers, of the C-suite, of programmers and other tech guys, and these are not necessarily the people that you think of when you think, okay, I'm going to go on Facebook or Twitter and do some posts. So what has been really helpful for us is you can is the targeting that Facebook and Twitter. Sorry, I can hear myself echoing. I don't know if it's me or
I can hear it. I can hear it too.
It's throwing me off.
I know. I'm sure. Matthew, can we just mute? Let's just have everyone else go on mute except for Betsy and see if that.
Yeah, that's coming from Cadera. I'm trying to mute her right now. Give me a second.
Thank you. It was like talking into a long hallway, like there was just that second echo. Some of the tools that have been really, really helpful are Facebook and Twitter targeting. You know, as two of the longest running social platforms, they are the most sophisticated when it comes to targeting, but you can really look at demographics of people who are interested in certain things, who use certain keywords, who follow other potentially competitor or affiliated accounts, and get in front of those people. There's no point in wasting your dollars and getting in front of my mom and my dad, or, you know, other people who may have followed you or may live in a certain area or whatever you're targeting. You can get really hyper targeted and, for the most part, get in front of the right people. And Facebook's great, you know, if you are spending a little bit of money with them as a small business or a medium-sized business, they do tend to have people at your disposal that can help you really take advantage of those tools. But they've also set them up so they're quite simple, so that if you wanted people who work in technology or who are interested in technology who live in the Delaware region and you've got a series of zip codes, you could target those people, and you're only paying to target those people, so you don't have to worry about, you know, again, paying to target and getting it in front of my mom and dad or people who aren't the right people to get in front of. I think the one thing that's important to note is you can get in front of these people with a B2B message, and it is totally possible, but you always have to keep in mind that, you know, most people are on Facebook in particular, Twitter a little bit less so, to connect with people personally. And so you want to make sure that your message or the things that you're putting out there as content are going to fit into that environment. I don't know exactly what kind of chemicals or what exactly you're dealing with, or but you don't want people to be scrolling through pictures of like their best friend's kids and then all of a sudden come across something that's really jarring, like, you know, a call to action for learning about a chemical. You might want to think about ways to how do you make your content kind of more relevant to the Facebook environment and do something interesting. Maybe it's like a little infographic about how your chemical is helping people in Africa have clean water. Obviously, I made that up at the top of my head, but something like that, something that brings it some relevancy to what people, you know, may be interested in. And again, that comes back to that Venn diagram of what do you want to talk about, and what do people want to hear about, and where can you find that sweet spot. LinkedIn is another great platform where B2B marketers really have some success in connecting. So we didn't talk about that very much tonight, but certainly for a lot of business marketing, that's been a platform that's really kind of evolved and become very successful there.
Excellent. Well, that's a great note to end on. Betsy, we were really, really lucky to have your expertise tonight. Some great Twitter chat going on in the background. We've got some great sidebar conversation and some great tips from you, and really, really relevant to a lot of the conversations we've been having in our class over the last several weeks. So thank you so, so much for joining us this evening.
Oh, thanks for having me. That was so much fun. And anyone is welcome to follow up with me. Holly has my contact information. If you have another question, or you can even just tweet it at me. I can be a little slow to respond when things are really busy, but I will do my best to get back to you, and I'm always here to help out fellow Blue Hens. So don't hesitate.
Wonderful. All right, well, great questions tonight, everybody. So have a good night. That's the end of our class. So if anyone has any other questions for me, again, same deal. Reach out via email or Twitter, and we're around. Have a good night, everyone.